First and foremost, I wanted to give thanks again for all of the support that everyone has given to the tribe over the years. And since we are non-linear, this means that we've met in another space at another time, and we're just coming and joining each other again. There's something that I just want you to write down, because as I keep digging deeper and deeper and going higher and higher in the truth and expanding the consciousness, what I'm starting to see is let's say, they have this metaphor, sometimes seen as a myth, that, the good people, if you may, when they die, they go to heaven, and there they live forever. And it's very interesting for me to die already and put myself in heaven and wonder, what exactly would I be doing forever? And, this is something that often doesn't come to mind, just in this rat race. This thing is pretty much doing the same thing every day in the matrix now. And, just on the matrix, but on the outside of this, there's a lot happening. In the inside of this, of course, there's a lot happening. And it's just one of those things that when you start expanding, it's like, well, I already know that I ascended and I went into that everlasting, but that doesn't necessarily say what I would be doing there. Would I just be laying there asleep? I mean, what would you be doing? And I started to realize that this is probably what I would be doing. And we got to start really tapping into where we're at with all of this. Like when somebody says, well, where are you at with all of this? And just tapping in and becoming aware that, we are here in this space, but we exist infinitely. And because of that, that means that we got to find something to do. And we have a tendency to spend the time that we have, if we come into dimensions with time, on things that we truly enjoy. And the byproduct of this realm is that we have to learn, just like any kind of customer frequency, what is to be enjoyed here. So if you go to another country, let me make that very simple. If you go to another country, you may ask them, so what do you guys do here? What's fun here? Like, where's the... so you're going to look for things to enjoy in that space. So every time you come to a new space, you find something new that you enjoy. And so we have to look at life that same way, that we come into these realms and we have to find what we enjoy about that realm. And if you can think about that on a planetary level, every time a planetary energy comes through, or every time a planetary energy is around you, it does take some time for you to figure out what exactly you enjoy about that energy, but you will find something. It's never unbalanced to a point where you won't find something that you prefer. And with that being said, for those that are new to the space tonight, if you could just take the time and opportunity to type a number 1 in the chat, just so I can get an idea of who's new into the space, that would be awesome. I also wanted to take this opportunity to touch and connect. This is something that we do, and something that we also enjoy by utilizing universal symbol for everlasting life, which we knew our ancestors were well aware of. We take a moment in infinity and we say, all right, this is a good time to really open up the space for everything that we prefer, because we have an inexhaustible well here. This means that the beings that you are present with right now, as powerful and as great as they are from different parts of the cosmos. But when we all come together in this magnificent electromagnetic spectrum, then we can accomplish anything. So this means that if at any point in the future you feel downtrodden and you feel like that you could use a boost, this is the space that you can get that from. All you have to do is remember that you are here. And also there are several of these spaces open at this point, and all of them work the same way. So it's something that we do just to acknowledge the infinite existence that we have, especially when we're coming out of some of this stuff going on in the fake matrix. I say for sure that this is a space, especially since we do this weekly, it's become a space that we can come in and really be ourselves, remember our real selves, ground into our real selves, and then also stay on the mission of what the masters that did come to Earth were working on, what they had to figure out too. No one has come into the space knowing everything about it. There has been knowledge that has been set up in the past for those that frequent the space to actually learn more about what goes on here. But we'll say for this lifetime that some of the things that are brought forth within sovereignty mentorship, ambassador training, tribe vibes, this space do come upon our ears newly this life. And it's also very refreshing, as anything new. You know, you get something new in the mail, you're expecting something. There's always that moment of excitement. I have that moment of excitement every time I come into the space, because it just so happens that every time I come into the space, something new is on my mind or going on. And I credit this to that. Also, when you look at all these beings, there are some with the cameras on and some that do not have their cameras on. They also have guides around them. And if you can imagine, existence is a huge thread of multiple lifelines of power. You can imagine that some may be a little bit in favor more than others, meaning that it's really about the DNA. So if someone does a lot of maintenance on their DNA, and their family and their parents does a lot of maintenance on the DNA, then they will have a strong, rich connection with their ancestry. And that ancestry is not visible by the naked eye, but around all the time. And it often speaks to us, and it often tells us, hey, do this, tap into this, you know, here it is here. And this has not ceased to happen for me really since I was young, more now that I've began on this mission of assisting others and getting them into a level of expansion with themselves. So I will say, for the record, because there's always questions about how do I increase my wealth? How do I fix myself? You know, there's always a range of questions surrounding, you know, how does one come into greater levels of empowerment? And I will tell you, the surefire way to really defeat the odds is to begin to assist others with truth. And so you should always see it not as something that is like, man, I'm trying to get them to understand, and, you know, you're over there stressing out about it. You should be stressed if you don't know the truth. You know, that would be something to be stressed out about. But as far as everybody else, and when they get it, you should just see it as your duty to be in the mix and be in the space and called to actually give them that level of connection. Also, because I enjoy this space so much, I do my best every single week to bring it all out, to bring out and bring in something that is not like just normally trafficked in the world. For me, even right now, I'm having this thing about, you know, just even social media. It's almost like when I jump into social media, it's like I immediately get turned off, because I feel like even me doing things on social media looks as fake as some of the stuff that I'm seeing on social media. It's just so obvious. I feel like I'm in like another world at this point when it comes to, you know, having an engagement and really determining what that engagement is going to consist of. And if it's just about more likes and more subscribes, then that's not it. And that's why I love this space, because I get opportunity to come here to speak to beings that I know, as long as they show up, I'm going to keep showing up, and our guides are going to keep showing up. So with that being said, we have come into this summer solstice, and that's been the big thing. And if you notice that most of the time, you'll see me kind of ride through most of these holidays, except for when we do tribe vibes, or most of these, not so much as holidays or holy days or significant days, celestial alignments, etc. But you won't see me really take to social media or even text messaging and all that kind of stuff. Happy this, happy that. And that's the benefit of having tribe vibes every week, because I get a chance to let it bake. I don't even really know most of this stuff is coming around. I don't know astrology enough to be like, well, tomorrow it's on the 9th degree of Saturn and this and this and this. Because I also believe that that will probably ruin life for me and the kind of person that I am, because I'm going to be trying to prepare for that, doing the best that I can for that. And it's easier for me to be in the cosmic flow and be in the vibration of the tribe by just coming in here, connecting with my heart, and treating everyone here like family, and knowing that my family has to keep accelerating and has to keep expanding in all of this madness. And I want to start by just a quote that really sets the tune for today and the knowledge that is being brought forth. And that quote is that the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness comprehends it not. Again, the light that shines in the darkness, but the darkness comprehends it not. This is obviously a biblical scripture, but was also pulled from an older book that is basically referring to the sun. and how if you turn off the sun, you're going to get what happens when you don't see the sun. It's going to be dark. And so you can say that this world is the darkness, because without the sun, there would be no light in this world. So that statement, when it says that the light shines in the darkness, it's saying literally that, hey, this space is really dark if it wasn't for the sun. And it's here, but people don't even really know what it is. If you really, really kind of dial in sometimes, it has this undefinable feel to it anyway. But just straight up, literally, people don't really know what the sun is. They don't know the sun's story. They don't know. They understand a little bit about its use. You know, like science has come forward and, well, it's doing this. It's sending these rays. You know, it helps the body do this. It helps things grow. There's stuff from natural observation that you can see it do. But just because you see something do something, does that mean you really know it? You can watch someone do something, but does that mean you really know them? So to know something, you have to have a relationship with it. And tonight, what we're going to be talking about is how to have a proper relationship with the sun. Because what the sun is capable of doing is it's a gateway. I have an actual scenario of being able to be in lucid sleep and then being able to go through the sun and then come out of the other side of the sun and then see this vast vista of what appear to be more suns. And in the metaphysical work, it says that actually, yes, that there are many suns, and eventually because they all connect into a central sun. And I want to today really, really speak deeply into how people became disconnected from the central sun, which would obviously give you the knowledge of how to make sure that you stay connected with the central sun. And I also want to just build into this. So it's 7:26. And what I would like to happen is when we reach yeah, the time's gone already. I'm like, when we reach 8 o'clock, we're like, wait a minute, 8 o'clock is only in 30 minutes. Okay, so when we reach on this side 8:45, so that's Central Standard Time, 45. So when it hits basically the 15-minute mark of the next hour on your clock, I want somebody to just go like this. Like, okay, we're getting to that time. Because I also know, and it was something that I saw last week, and I trust that everyone's got a chance to dive into that archive, but people start getting fatigue after 3 hours. And it doesn't really do me any good to give you knowledge while you're fatigued. Like, this is stuff that is, if I could give you an hour of it and you're fresh and I could just give you that, we could say the rest for later, because for you to be on point with this, it changes everything. I'll say it's going to change everything if you haven't seen massive changes in your life. Like, what this is all about and what we're doing here is we're changing destiny. Some people want to know why, as we mentioned, the fates are always against them. Like, why is this happening? And if it's true that this is some kind of course, or that there's an orbit here and we keep repeating this, does that mean I'm going to go through another life and be dealing with what I dealt with before? The pain, the envy, the hatred, the ignorance, all those kind of things. Am I going to have to go through that lesson again? Well, to change your destiny or to guide your own boat gives you the ability to not loop the loop. And that's what this is about. So this is your time and this is your opportunity to gain the advanced level of metaphysical technology that actually enables you to guide your own course, to steer your own ship, rather than just to keep repeating as a character. We also talked about before that it wasn't really the objective of the entire world to make that happen for everyone. In fact, the knowledge and the ability of how to actually get in and out of the matrix, that there was even a matrix, etc., was really something that became more or less what you can see as, I guess the word that we have used is somewhat of a hack. And it's a hack because it wasn't something that was necessarily a part of the original design. It was just something that we started doing when we began to write and we began to leave records. Because what writing and symbols and records are is they allow us to create memories. And memories are basically like guidelines and guideposts to where you are at a specific point. That's why what wisdom truly is learning from somebody else's experience. So somebody else does something, you see what they do, and if it's beneficial, then you do it, and if it's detrimental, then you avoid it. And through that type of navigation, you can actually get into massive spaces. It's really no limitation to what can actually happen. But for the record, that level of diving deep into the system, it doesn't seem like that was really what was happening on Earth for a while. This knowledge and this wisdom that we're using, our building of structures such as the pyramids, is knowledge that has been brought to the planet that did not really exist in the planet. And let me just make this clear, because it's just in case that comes to conflict with what anybody is thinking. So raw nature is raw nature. It grows. It's produced from other forces, air, heat, right? These energies coming together and commingling, and then starting that process all the way from the amoeba, and then beginning the growth in all the things that we see here on the planet, the trees, the moss, etc. But when we start talking about Al Burj in Dubai, or a bullet train, or a Hellcat, all of that is something that we've bought into the space that we begin to create. So what this will help you do is it'll help you get an opportunity to understand the difference between what we have to unfortunately use the words as the Father and the Son. Now, I'll say for the record that these are not human beings. As you know it, you're not only a human being. There's something else that exists. That it's funny, because no matter what we exist as, we seem to want to give it a name. So we're calling ourselves human beings because we're comprised of flesh, and then we also have spirit and all the rest that goes with what we are. So we're saying we're human beings. So when you automatically then start trying to refer to the creator of all things, or the regenerators of all things, as human beings, you're basically trying to put them into the box. And they're not in the box. And I actually have a text that explains when this happened. And it comes somewhat at the part of the crumbling of the original Freemasonry, right around the time where the Catholics, and let me just go ahead and get the text so nobody thinks I'm just going in on this one on my own. There's absolutely no reason to. As I said before, I already have the annuals and a great deal of the knowledge and wisdom, and it's just a matter of when I get to it at a certain point, meaning that now we're living in a time where pretty much all the knowledge is available, but that's also coming at a time where people really don't seek knowledge, or don't know exactly what knowledge to seek or what they're looking for. And then oftentimes, even when they find something, they are led by the opinions of others. And then through that, they've cast judgment. So they have been judged. And then they fall from the grace of being aware of maybe what the truth was, especially if everybody else's determination of it is not true at all. So let's just read this here very briefly. Let me pull it up on my other screen so that I can see it larger. And so it says here, so-called Christianity has no right in Masonry, and Masonry is only true without it. Catholic Knights Templars, Knights of St. John, and Knights of Malta, to save themselves from utter destruction by Richard Coeur de Leon, merged themselves into Masonic bodies, and then, advancing the number of degrees, withheld themselves from the poorer brotherhood and became bodies militant and aristocratic, subservient to Catholicism and the worship of Virgin Mary. And as the heads of the Catholic Church are well aware that Masonry is the only really true belief, and that all their story of the Virgin Mother and her infant son is only a perversion of the ancient wisdom. So they must always be an enemy to truth, for they well know that once a Mason, always a Mason. True Masonry makes no distinction in creeds or religion, in color or race, but a belief in one God, the grand architect of the universe. So what we're using this here to do is just simply verify that Freemasonry, as we know it, was infiltrated by what we can today call Catholicism, who were the Knights Templar. And we actually have a lot of knowledge about the Knights Templar and them even creating banking, money, using alchemy, etc. But it's to be understood here that there was a Richard Coeur de Leon who was on their ass for probably multiple reasons and probably had a great deal of power. And so they needed to kind of mingle in or disappear, and they disappeared into the then Masonic groups of that time, especially since Masonry only meant to understand that diagram on the right side, which we're going to be talking about here in just a moment, but basically to understand how the body, the mind, the universe, the planet, the cosmos, the sun, and everything all function together. Okay? So we just want to verify by this statement, though, that it is for sure that the Catholics came into Freemasonry. And so now you can then see that more than likely then all the knowledge that we're dealing with is of those who were trying to advance their own self-interest. And they needed to kind of switch it up a bit about how people viewed the creation, because not only the creation, but God. Because at this point, especially in history, there's known to be three lights. This is the moon, the sun, and earth. And through these three lights, all things that have been in this existence are created. These three lights are seen as just that. They're not really given an ID like they're human beings, they're men, they're women, etc. And this is done for sure for a reason. But it was through the advent of Catholicism that God became a man, or more importantly, the Son became a man. Now, this is very interesting too, because just in itself, I'm not sure if anybody really is aware, how many people are really aware that the term Jesus or Isus is Isis. And this term Isu is actually, is not only Isis, but Isis is also the Virgin Mary. And what this is about is it's an esoteric reference that the Son took the power or was granted the power. I don't want to say took, but was granted the power from his mother. So he took his mother's name. And that's what Isu is. It's Isis. Okay. And so with that level of awareness just alone, you can just see the level of falsehood, because again, things that are really involve such great levels of power are taken into another context as human beings struggling and dealing with issues in life, etc. And while that is nice and becomes relative to maybe where we're at right now, for anyone that's trying to expand beyond this, this could be somewhat of a stumbling block, because your mind would be fused in seeing these beings as mere mortals, mere human vessels, when in fact they are eternal, and we know that by proof. And since we're them, then we would confirm it that way unless we bow down to something that was in that image. Because once we bow down to something in the image of man, we're basically then acknowledging that we're no greater than that, when we know that, in fact, this is actually principalities. And the principalities don't even really determine if we're talking about something good or something bad, because they still all depend on each other. So as an example here, we often see the air as being the good one, going up, going to heaven as being the good one. But I come to tell you that actually, I just found out that the jinn specifically live in the air. We also see the God of the Bible steaming himself in the ocean and then creating a heaven, or basically water up there, and then going to live up there. So living up there or being in the air is not necessarily a signifier that that is good. And this kind of lets us know that this whole good and bad thing that we're trying to use to determine what's going on is not really it's not really the most proficient component to utilize to understand what we're really in. We're beyond good and bad at this point. What we need to really do is understand what's going on, Like when we say, if you judge, you shall be judged, it just means that once you come to a conclusion or think you've come to the conclusion of something, if you happen to not be right about your conclusion, which is why they say to become a judge, you need to be an elder, you need to gain all this wisdom, etc. And what they're really saying is, listen, you never really want to make any conclusive, hard-coded things going in your consciousness unless you're absolutely sure. Because if you do that and you happen to not, it happens to be false, what you're doing that with, then what you do is you create a foundation that's going to crumble. So you're basically then judged by your own lies. Okay? So when we cast judgment on things that we don't understand, then we're automatically wound up into this rejudgment because we now have taken on the path of untruth. So as we keep going with this, what I want to make everyone realize here today is that there's then a difference between what we would say is the Father versus the Son, and that difference is very specific. So we're using now the term as Father as, let's say, the Son's generator, like where the Son came from. Okay? So when we use that term, we're saying, so where did the Son come from? We have to understand that the Son is a composition primarily of the mother and the Father. And because of that, this means that the Father, if you want to say that's the central Son, is basically giving life to or giving seed to everything. And then what you have is these vessels, which you would call the earth, that receive that energy. And then when it receives that energy, that vessel, that seed, it brings forth something. And the firstborn of that something, the first thing to come into creation in the physical world would be the Son. And that's why what I said before is an easier way to look at the Son now then is that the Son is inside of, now we're not living on a sphere, right? But it doesn't mean that a sphere is not around us. So if we look at like your mother's womb, and how the womb is shaped, it's like a sphere. And if you can say that your mother is with child, this means that let's say that the Son is still inside of her womb. Now, we talked about this before. It's a term that means ruling from the egg. It just means that you do most of your work inside of the womb, that there's life inside of the womb. There's actual existence going on with the child inside of the womb. It's not just waiting to get here. It's already in an existence. So you can see the Son then is actually being inside of this womb still and ruling from the egg, meaning actually regenerating from the egg. So now, if we can just distinguish then that the Father is the central Son and the central Son is somewhere in the center of all of this. I don't want to say it's out there. It's the deepest in here, right? And then we can also say then that the Son then, it has, let's say, the job, or it has a job inside of this space that the Father is not doing. And what that job is really encoded in the word salvation. We started looking at all of these words: solution, salvation. We saw the sal on the front of it, which is salt, which is a cube. And what we've come to is we've come to this awareness that even within the word, actually salvage would be the word that you're looking for. Salvage and salvation. That the Son's job is basically to regenerate. So we have a creator which creates, and it's not a regenerator. So it's not hanging out for the whole process. It delegates that to the Son. The Son's then responsibility is to till the field. So let me show you how we know that from an esoteric level. Now, remember, we're not talking about, when I say Son, we're not talking about man and female, but you see how that can throw you. S-U-N, S-O-N, you see what I mean? So let's just look at this and let's understand just from a symbolic level the difference between the Father and the Son. And it would, again, be so difficult for us to do this these days because the word son is a reference to a male. So this is how this linguistic system that has been created, which for sure is a proponent of this Catholicism and their changing of the Latin words into English and how they decided those words would come out in English. It basically sends your mind into a twist because you have a mother and father on the planet. And so you just identify the male and the female with your mother and the father, not with what's inside of your mother and father. So very simply put, if you were to do this mathematically, you would say that, you see how the Tetragrammaton here on the left, let's say when it would explode into 4 parts, as we've talked about, would be on the bottom. And then as you keep getting closer and closer to the top, it centralizes itself, okay, into just the yod. All right. So let's say that central point, that's the yod there, would be this father or central son. And every time it lays out a word or a seed, now those words or seeds in their composition become responsible for sustaining everything below it. Just like what you would say is a legacy. What you would say is, you know, how it's your responsibility if you're the oldest to take care of the younger. The same thing is like a hierarchy. You don't see the general just down there with the first class soldiers, right? There has to be an ordination. So that way there's not micromanaging and, you know, you got somebody really powerful doing something that is super, super easy to do. You know, you get everybody into the level of what they need to be doing in the experience. So if we imagine that the universe is designed like this, then what we would say is on the left with the Tetragrammaton, this would be the units of the Father. And when they total that all up, as you can see, they give the number 26. And then, of course, the name of God seems to summarize itself into the number 72. So then this first cube is known, or on the left, or this first seed is actually called, as we know, the Tetragrammaton. So what's said in mysticism is that this evolves as all geometry evolves. This is why they say that it's important to understand that how this triangle would then move into a cube and then move into a pentagram and then move into a hexagram, etc. Because in that respect, you would understand through math, through absolute numbers, through ma'at, the truth to the matter. So then you wouldn't have to argue with anybody because you already knew the truth. You wouldn't have to believe because you knew and it was confirmed by ma'at. So what this is saying is that there was a succession, and you'll see this in occult works, that after the Tetragrammaton, which you can see as the father, the Pentagrammaton became the inheritor of the power. So this was seen as the New Testament, as we've talked about the new testicles, okay? So this means that there's literally a new order. There's a new component being added, and this component is sitting at the top of the head of that Adam sigil there, and that component is known as Shin. This addition actually gives the term Yad-He Vahe, then the term Yad-He Shin Vahe, which basically comes out in English as Yehoshua or Joshua. Okay? So in this respect, what occultists are saying is that there was an additional element added to the old system, this element being known as ether or Shin, and this then gave a greater level of power. Now, you notice how in this Pentagrammaton, there is Adam and Eve, because we know that this symbol is related to Mercury or Hermes. How do we know that? If we look deeper into the symbol, let me go ahead and pull it up here and let me blow it up a little bit. We look deeper into the symbol here instead of trying to figure out everything that they put in there to confuse everybody and to look all mystical. Just notice that the rod of Hermes is in there sitting in the center. And then also what we have here, give me a moment, I need to get control of my mouse. 1 second. There we go. So we know that this is Hermes, and Hermes is what they call changeable, which is interesting because this term, as we know, is the androgen or changeable, just means you actually have this floating point. This point where, just like what the Chinese and the Oriental tradition teaches of how the 5 elements can keep rolling into each other, you have this rolling happening, and this rolling becomes known as the wheel. Okay? So this palindrome here in the center, just very briefly, which we saw a little bit of last week, I'm going to decode this palindrome very briefly of what this actually says. Now, remember that this palindrome, and I have it on the wall here, and I actually can, let me just see if I have the image here. Give me 1 second. Because what you're looking at here is something to the tune of a Rosetta Stone for the spiritual world, meaning that once you kind of know what's going on inside of this, you simultaneously also know like the numerical equivalent to certain words. And then it's like an encryption. Once you know the numerical equivalent to certain words, then you actually are able to map out the code or the check back to all the English language. And then what that then allows you to do is it allows you to decode other works. So I don't have the actual image that I'm looking for here on my computer, but I will show one very similar to it that actually goes in with the poem of what this really means. Let me blow it up here. Okay, so that's that same word here again. And again, every time, as you'll see this this tradition that we're under now with the Catholicism, every time they use symbols, they know what they're doing. They're going to put men there. They're going to put, I don't know, they're going to try to make it as polarized as possible. But there's a truth that is being presented here. Also, I will say that you even see the what you would call defamation of these symbols, because this symbol should never be written in the direction that is actually written right now. In ancient times, and let me show it written in ancient times, it's always written a certain way, because if it's not written a certain way, it's almost like you just put the reverse onto your spaceship, because this, which is called the twisting thing, is actually the formula of how the field works inside of the body. So once again, this says rotas, opera, tenet, arepo, sator. And what this means is, very simply, I'm just going to read it verbatim. The sower holds the plow, arepo, the wheels. Okay, so the sower holds the plow, the sun, the wheels, okay? Because arepo actually is the abbreviation of Harhop, who is Harpocrate, or Serapis, who's basically Mercury, Hermes, Thoth, etc. So what this is saying, because it says many things actually, and anything that you can derive from it would be true, because how all the numbers are put together. So whether you're adding it up left or right or up or down, it equals 65. So it's about a 6 and it's about a 5. Now, we also know anytime you get an even and an odd number, it's actually about all the numbers. So what it's saying is it's giving you something specific about power. And it's saying that the central sun, what does it say? Holds the plow, while the sun, or what would be you, or what would be you in the risen state, would work the wheel. Now, it just so happens that this geometry that we're referring to, as we can see here, this 360, which is 72, which is the number of the Father, times 5, gives us 360, which is a circle or a wheel. So what this is technically saying is, this is how, instead of squaring the circle, which is their term, we're going to square the circle. This is to circle the square. And that makes more than enough sense to me, because obviously they're always doing things backwards. So they're talking about squaring the circle, squaring the circle. But Pentagrammaton circles the square. And so what that means is that means that it is the allotment of power that is given to you as a wheel. That basically in the galaxy, the Father, central Son's got that under control. But for you, you work the wheel. So this means that you're able to then guide destiny if you know how to work the wheels of your life. And working the wheels of your life inside of this new modern religious tradition is seen as evil and demonic and satanic. You see what I mean? Because of course they don't want you working your own wheel. And this is what you start seeing. It's pretty much in everything, in many of the works. It's like, it's against you utilizing certain levels of awareness. This doesn't mean that you go and draw some circles on the ground and you light up some candles and now you're doing all this kind of stuff. That's not even necessary. The greatest temple is inside of your consciousness and inside of your mind. What this is about is that if your knowledge is in order, though, as the planets need to be in order, and as a baby going through 9 months needs to be in order, that there is something very orderly happening here. And the central Son can teach you about that order. And then as being the arepo or the wheel, you're able then to carry out those orders. And that allows you to actually become into alignment inside of your life. Okay? So very clearly, the way that the sun is actually moving through the sky is why the sun is seen to actually be in alignment with the Father, because the sun is the closest thing to walking the path every single day throughout the constellations of what you should be doing. Do you understand? So even if you decide to be off in Uranus somewhere or in Venus or in a whole nother frequency or wavelength, the sun is actually going through the specific constellation that you're supposed to be going through. So when the term get your house in order comes across, what it really is a reference to make sure that your house is in alignment with the central sun. So whatever is it time, and so you can see how all this made sense for the ancients, because if not, there's no refrigerators to be trying to cool down or freeze what you should have been storing away from the desert's heat. There's no water reservoirs and purification machines and all this kind of stuff to be clearing out brackish water that is coming down from the silts of the mountain that should have been gathered. You see what I mean? So there's our ancestors depended on this knowledge of the stars, and in turn, this knowledge of the stars allowed them to understand the knowledge of the central thing, all there really is. And when they were in alignment with that, which they were doing with the natural love of life, it wasn't like they had to force themselves into doing it. That kept them on this continuous process where they say that there is literally a ladder of lights or an ascension process. And this ascension process comes about because if you're motivating the right way, then you're constantly growing and you're constantly expanding. So you're being leveled up every time.